Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this first inaugural continuing education program by NATDA for 2018. My name is Chad Carr. I've been involved with NATDA for 10 years now. I remember finding out that NATDA existed and being so excited that we were going to have an organization that was paying attention to dealers in this industry, paying attention to the needs, the educational needs of dealers. And it was just such a great benefit for the industry, and certainly for me too, that I got involved just almost at the very beginning and in helping to try to put together educational programs, putting together these webinars. And so I'm just really thrilled that after all these years that Corey and Heather will still have me from time to time participate in this. Today we're going to be talking about what is a dealership management system. If you were at the trade show this last year in September, you would have certainly noticed that there were an awful lot of different businesses there talking about software, talking about dealership management systems, or possibly using the terms ERP with bigger companies. That's kind of popular. And it was really very interesting and surprising for me because I've been coming to the trade show for 10 years. I've certainly been talking about dealership management all of that time, and there have been others as well, but usually not more than one or two other people. And this year there were a lot. So that's really an interesting thing for our industry. It means that a lot of businesses are paying attention to our industry is maturing, and it certainly has people thinking, is it time for me? What are all of these? And is it time for me to be considering one? And that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to be able to make this interactive. If you have questions during this, I'd like you to feel like you can ask them. If I don't have a moderator, and right now all of your microphones are muted, so we don't have a lot of feedback, but in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you should have a toolbar for GoToWebinar, and you'll see a couple of things that you could use to try to ask a question. One of them is a place where you can raise your hand, and that will signal me that you have a question, and I could unmute your microphone, especially if you're called in through the telephone instead of through the computer. There's another where you can chat a question, and I will probably, not be looking at it all the time, but I'll try to pay attention to those, and if I see somebody has a question or has their hand raised, I'll try to pause and answer that throughout the program. I want to really break this into three different topics today. What is a dealership management system, and how do we define that? Why would you use a dealership management system? And then finally, who needs a dealership management system? How do you evaluate for yourself, is it time for me to be looking at these or not? And that's a different answer for every business, right? Your business is different than the other people who are on this call. So you need to evaluate that separately, and I'll try to give you some tools to be able to do that. First of all, if we talk about what is a dealership management system, I like to talk about this in terms of three different categories of software. We're all familiar with off-the-shelf software packages, things like QuickBooks, Peachtree, Microsoft Excel, Mind Your Own Business. There's all kinds of them, and we don't really go to the store and buy a box like we used to. We're more likely to download it. But it's something that was built for small business, but not specifically for trailer dealers or service departments. It's built for sort of generic small business software. You then have another category, which are where we start seeing industry-specific modules, things that are written specifically for the trailer business and understand things about the trailer business, but they'll integrate with a back-end package like QuickBooks or others, okay? And then you have a third category, which are fully integrated systems with what I call native accounting. Now, others might call it something different, but basically the accounting was built in from scratch. It was baked in at the beginning. And there are some benefits to that. There are also some drawbacks to that, and we'll try to cover both of those in our presentation today. When we talk about off-the-shelf packages, these are the things we're talking about. And some of these names you're probably familiar with. I'm sure there's some that you all are familiar with, but we have things like Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets for keeping track of spreadsheets. Peachtree, Sage 50, Sage 200 is another one. Xero is an up-and-coming product. And then obviously the biggest one in that arena is QuickBooks. And probably more than 50% of all the businesses in America probably use QuickBooks or some derivative of it if they're using software. So I sort of use the term QuickBooks sometimes interchangeably with Xero or Sage or some of those others, and I don't mean to slight the others. They're very similar. They work very much like QuickBooks, and have a lot of the same benefits. It's just easier for me, right, to say QuickBooks. And these are what I would call the off-the-shelf software packages, and they have some really nice benefits to them. They're very affordable. They're relatively easy to learn, relatively easy to use. It's easy to find and replace employees. And this wasn't something I used to think about, but I've had customers who've pointed out, you know, if you lose somebody who's running your books for you and you're using QuickBooks, it's not very long if you place an ad before somebody answers that and says, I've used QuickBooks before. And that can be a benefit. And then it's also, there's so many accountants out there now that use QuickBooks that you often can just upload your files right to your accountant and save a lot of that data entry of the accountant having to re-enter things. And that can be a real benefit. Your accountant usually appreciates that. If we talk about some of the drawbacks, though, one of them is that using those systems often requires multiple data entry points. You have to put the same thing in more than one place. And a lot of that is because those systems are missing key industry functions, things that happen in the trailer business that don't necessarily happen in other businesses, things like having floor plan, having curtailment payments, having draws against commissions, or getting a load of trailers and having to split the freight out at different amounts per the size of the trailer. Another one is if you do living quarters and they're manufactured by a different manufacturer and you got to take two invoices and make them into one. Those are all unique things that just aren't going to be handled by an off-the-shelf package. So you have to keep track of things in a separate spreadsheet. You have to refer back and forth to those different spreadsheets, and you can end up in what one of my clients once called spreadsheet hell. There are also limited checks and balances. Now, for some people, this is a benefit. QuickBooks and on other off-the-shelf systems make themselves easy to use by doing away with a lot of the checks and balances that are in a traditional accounting system. For example, if you write a check for a wrong amount and you fat-fingered it and you wrote it for $2,000 instead of $200, it's really easy in those systems to just go right back in and change it to $200 and update it, and voila, you're done. In an accounting system with real debits and credits and audit trails, you'd have to go make journal entries to do that, right? So that you know who did what. And you know, if you're really small and you're doing your books yourself and you're not worried that somebody could be fudging the numbers to you know, either because they didn't do their job right or because maybe think they're your partner, right? Then you know that might not be an issue. But if you get to the size where you've got lots of different people handling your money, having those checks and balances becomes more important. Your financial reporting out of QuickBooks is going to be fairly generic, and I'll show you some examples of that a little bit later on in the presentation. And your integration, when you integrate with it, it's usually one way at best, and not through the fault of anybody who's trying to integrate with it, but QuickBooks has millions of customers, and their programming departments don't even get out of bed unless they think it's going to sell them another 100,000 copies. Well, if you got every single person in the trailer business together and said, we're all going to use QuickBooks, they're still not going to get out of bed to do anything different for you or to do anything different with a company that you're working with that integrates things. So, and we can talk about what that means later on. But the systems that integrate with QuickBooks solve a lot of those problems for you. And I've got a couple different examples here, some that have been either at this trade show or a couple trade shows. There are a few here that I don't know they were at this trade show, but I've seen them around before. Windboats obviously isn't for trailers, but it's one we work with in another industry that does the same thing, integrating with QuickBooks. And these solve some important problems for us. One, they reduce our data entry because, two, they handle a lot of these key industry functions. Right? They know what floor plan is. They know what freight is all about. They know what commissions are all about. And as you need to process those things, it does the work with you, for you, so you don't have to re-enter that stuff in 2 or 3 or 4 different places. You're going to get better tools for managing your sales and your service and your parts. You're not going to be using some generic invoicing system to handle every aspect of your business. You can have quoting tools. You can have work orders. You can have parts tickets. You're going to have better reporting and forecasting because you're going to be looking at things that aren't necessarily part of bookkeeping, but are really important, like how many people came in and talked to me this month. That doesn't show up anywhere in a bookkeeping package, but in a sales system designed for trailer industries, that'd be an important thing to know. And a really nice benefit of using these is you get to keep QuickBooks, right? If you really, really like QuickBooks and you've used it for a long time and you don't want to go away from it, then these can be a really terrific option for you. When we talk about the fully integrated systems with what I call the native accounting, these are others. Some of them are going to be brand new to you. You wouldn't have seen them before this year, although that doesn't mean they're completely new to the industry. Most of these I know of at least one or two dealers out there that have used them. There are others that have been around for a long time and been working with lots of different trailer dealers. But all of these are going to have all of the same types of front-end features that you would have with the integrated packages, but they also have accounting that's baked in from the ground up, right? And so you're going to have the reduced data entry, the key industry functions, et cetera, and so forth. But with the native dealership accounting, you're going to also have some additional benefits that we'll talk about as well. So let's move on. We'll come back and circle around to that. But I want to, as we continue to try to define this, let's talk about why would you use a dealership management system? And the simplest way that I can explain this is to think about yourself, right? You're the owner. You run the business and you started it yourself, or maybe took it over from a parent or a spouse or a partner. And you have all of these different responsibilities. You have to pay attention to what's going on with sales, with the finance, get it with your inventory, your parts department, your service department, getting things delivered, getting the accounting done. And it's at some point, you're able to do most of that in your head or with some slight tools, right? If you're a 2 or 3 person operation, it's pretty easy to know what everybody's doing. You may not do the books, but you write all the checks and you take all the deposits to the bank. Pretty hard to have anybody pull the wool over your eyes if you're handling all the money yourself, right? You're making most of the sales. You've got somebody helping you do the service work, but you can, go open the door and see what they're doing. I've always said that there's nobody out there, myself included, who can create a software program that can be better at running a dealership than the owner. It's your business. You know how it works. You know what you need to have happen. The challenge is that as you grow, as a dealership grows, you get to the point where you have other people managing those things for you. And when other people are managing, that means the information's in their head, not in your head. And so now your computer brain, which is good at managing everything, doesn't have all the information or can't keep up with all the information. And so how do you as an owner know what's happening in all those different areas? Now, obviously, communication is important, right? And you can have meetings with all these people and talk, hey, what's happening over here in sales? What's happening over here in service? But you get to a point where you can't do that anymore either, not effectively, right? And a lot of that has to do with how many people you have on your staff, how long you've worked with each other, et cetera. A dealership management system is basically a computer system that's designed to let each of these people work at a computer, do their work on the computer, and the computer system will collect the data as they're doing their work. So if you're in sales and you're writing up sales orders, you're doing it on a computer, and it has the benefit of printing out your purchase agreement or printing out your buyer's order, but it's also collecting all the data about what you agreed to. If you're in the service department, you're writing up a service ticket, you do that on a computer and it prints out a work order, but the computer now knows everything as well. And what that allows you to do is each department can know what the other department's doing, and you as the owner can sit down with either the system or with reports or with somebody who's going to show you how to get the reports, and you can see what's going on in all the different aspects of your business without having to spend your whole day going around and finding out what the issues are. Again, I believe that computer systems aren't going to solve problems in a dealership. I think owners and people solve problems. But if you have to spend 7 hours a day finding out what the problem is, that doesn't leave you a whole lot of time to solve it. If you have everybody communicating and doing their work in a system, you can see what those things are much quicker and spend your time fixing things instead of finding things. So that's really the simplest, but also the most honest explanation I can have of why you would use a dealership management system and what one is. If you are totally in control of everything, you know what's happening in your business, nothing gets by on you, you're very happy with your performance, you probably aren't a candidate as somebody who really needs to be getting a dealership management system. But if you're getting to the point where you're not sure what's happening, there's lots of activity around you and you don't know what's going on all the time, there are a lot of good reasons why you might want to look at one, and we'll share those throughout the rest of this program. So let's go back to the off-the-shelf software packages. We've obviously talked about what these benefits are. We've talked about what some of these drawbacks are, and I'd like to go into just a little bit more detail on that as we talk about, and again, I'm not picking on QuickBooks. This would be any of the off-the-shelf systems. But I want to talk about what are the issues with QuickBooks. Now, full disclosure, I am not a fan of QuickBooks, but there are lots of people who are fans of QuickBooks. So these are my opinions about why it's not the best system for a dealership, especially as it's growing. But you know, there are plenty of people out there that use it and love it. So you know, my word is not the gospel. These are just some things I've observed over my years of working with trailer dealers. One of them is that we talked about this a little bit. It's built one size fits all, and so it can't handle critical types of transactions, like it's not very good at handling your inventory, especially for your trailers. Commissions and draws, not so good at that. The parts management, not so good at that. The job costing, making sure that all the work that you do to a trailer before you sell it to a customer gets tracked and paid attention to, right? So if you take in a trade for $1,500 and you do $1,000 worth of work to it before you sell it, everybody in your company needs to know you got $2,500 in that, or you run the risk of losing some money, right? So making sure that it does that, and off-the-shelf systems don't tend to do very well with that. Managing floor plan, right? Being able to do quotes. Now, those packages, those dealership management systems that integrate with a QuickBooks or some other off-the-shelf, they will do these things for you. They will solve that problem, right? So if those are the things you don't like about using an off-the-shelf system, you can solve that problem and still use the off-the-shelf system. So that's nice, right? The other things that, you know, in terms of my issues with QuickBooks, and again, if these don't apply to you, I get it. But in an effort to be easy to use, which it is, they really abandoned any kind of error checking and a lot of the basic rules of accounting. In fact, QuickBooks is not really an accounting package. It's a very good bookkeeping system. It gives you reports that look like accounting, but it doesn't require the kind of double entry, auditable reporting that a full-blown accounting package would. Now, there's downsides to that too. There's more work to do in a full-blown double entry audit trail accounting package, right? So again, there's no one size fits all for anybody here. But just as an example, these are numbers that I was working with a dealer, and they handed me their statements out of one of those off-the-shelf packages, and this is what this is right off of their financial statement. They were saying that they had done $1.18 million in sales and had $1.32 million in cost of goods. Now, you can't do that for very long, right? You can't do that at all, because you can't even pay off your floor plan, and your floor plan lender will shut you down. So so they were showing a gross margin of negative $141,000. Now, you cannot stay in business and do that, and yet this business had been in business for 10 years. Well, the issue is that what was happening is they were able to, in their system, and this is just off-the-shelf system, okay? This isn't any dealership management system. They were able to go in and pay off units twice. So they'd make the sale, and they would pay off the unit, and that would go to their cost of goods. But then some other time, either before or after, they'd go and make the payment, and they would pay it again. Not on every unit, right? But often enough that their accounting was just terrible, right? Now, human error, sure, right? But it was a system that allowed that human error to happen quite frequently. Now, the other thing about that is, in addition to being easy to make honest mistakes, it's also easy to be dishonest in these systems, okay? And that's unfortunate, but it is easy to make things disappear All the things that make it easy to use. For example, I create an invoice for $500 and I decide later that I made a mistake and it was really only supposed to be 50. It's really nice that I can go in and I can change it to 50 without having to know how to do accounting or having to know how to do any passwords or anything like that. I just pull it back up, I change a couple numbers, it's 50, wonderful, my mistake is fixed. That same system will allow me, if I'm your service writer, my friend comes in and we do $500 worth of repairs on his trailer. He hands me $300 of cash, gives me a wink and a smile. I go into the system, I change the invoice to $50, I put $250 in my pocket. You don't have any way to know if the only thing you're counting on is the reporting out of that system. Now, if you're in a business where there's no chance that's happening to you, or you're 99% sure that that can't be happening to you, then not a concern. But I know people who have fired people after building 1 or 2 trailers out of parts that they've smuggled out of the business, right? If you have never, I've said this in other webinars, if you have not ever caught anyone stealing from you, keep looking, right? It's a matter of time. And I don't mean to be suspicious of everybody, but that's the way business is, right? If people think if they think they can figure out how to solve a personal problem on your dime, they can and will, okay? So that's an issue with it. And then my last thing that I'll say is that if you're, for me, for my druthers, and I think for some dealers, the financial reporting that comes out of those systems is a little bit too generic, a little bit too basic. And I've used this example before. This is, again, a real dealer's financial numbers out of an off-the-shelf system. And basically what you've got is it says your sales of trailers, and they're all lumped here together, your sales of parts, your sales of repairs, some finance income, consignment income. So you got your revenue, you've got cost of trailers, cost of parts, commissions, so total costs. You got a gross profit. Okay, that's good. All right. And then we've got all of our different expenses lumped in here, usually alphabetically or numerically. So we know that we lost $22,000. There's not anybody on this call based on this data who could tell me one thing about why this dealer lost $22,000. You cannot tell from looking at their financial statements, because I know I made some money on the trailer sales. Did I make enough? Well, I need to go see what, if I take my cost of the trailers at $628,000, add my $10,000 of commissions, okay, but what did I spend in floor plan interest? What did I spend in advertising? What did I spend in lot maintenance? I can't see any of it. It's all buried in that $272,000. Did my parts department make money? Did my service department make money? I got no idea. None whatsoever, right? Now, if you, again, remember what I said about a small dealership who can keep it all in their brain, they don't need this. The only reason they need to have accounting is so that they can send numbers to their bank when they need to borrow money and numbers to Uncle Sam when it's time to pay their share of the national debt, okay? So, but if you're trying to figure out how, if you're to the point where you need to see, am I making money in this department? Am I making money in that department? You've got to be able to have better numbers in this. Now, you can take an off-the-shelf system and modify your chart of accounts and modify the way you post things so that you can get better numbers than this. It's just very rare that anybody does. Now, if you're working with a DMS that integrates with those packages, they may help you do that. They may help you get better reporting out of that system. So I need to end with this, though, okay, because I just gave you my 5-minute sermon on why in my opinion, am not a fan of QuickBooks. QuickBooks is a great system for these reasons that I said before, okay? And in this world, there are millions and millions of people who use QuickBooks more than use anything I've ever done, all right? So, and if they came to me tomorrow and said, hey, you want to trade companies, I'd say, boy, do I love QuickBooks, let's do it, right? So there are great things about it. And as I said before, I know people who have gone from these really big native accounting systems back to a system that integrates with QuickBooks because they really wanted to make it easy. They didn't want to be held hostage by employees. They didn't want to have a hard time finding or training somebody. They loved that they could get in there and make changes. But they also was you know, the owner was in there themselves or the owner's spouse was in there. They had people they could really trust. So you have to gauge that for yourself. That's up to you, okay? But even if you're wanting to stick with your QuickBooks, you can still get engaged with dealership management systems. They're out there, okay? They're out there and they're available. Okay, so with that in mind, these are some of them, okay? Now, if we talk about those benefits, they're written for trailer dealers or similar businesses, right? Not written for millions of people and you have to figure it out. They're written for your kind of business. They handle those key industry transactions. They provide detailed reporting by department. They're able, I got out of order there. They collect data as people are doing their work. They pass that data into the QuickBooks system and then they can be used by more people in the business, right? So, because if you're just using an off-the-shelf system, it's probably just your bookkeeper using it, right? But if you're using a dealership management system that integrates with that, then you can have your salesperson using it. You can have your service person using it. You can have all the different departments using it, okay? When you talk about the other systems with the native accounting, you're going to get all those same benefits, okay? And in addition to that, you're going to get departmentalized accounting, right? So you can go say, how much did my service department make? How much did my parts department make? How much am I making in this area? You're going to get accounting checks and balances. So when you're trying to make sure that the right hand and the left hand know what each other are doing, you've got checks and balances to do that, right? So if the sales department says, we're going to put $2,000 worth of improvements on your trailer, then the service department does their work. It's the accounting department that runs both of those transactions that makes sure that it was really $2,000 worth of work, right? Or your service shop has done work and you need to make sure that it gets onto the trailer before you sell it, right? Those checks and balances are a really key function of that you can have when it's all dealership accounting. Full audit trails to back up your work. That generally doesn't matter to people until they have an audit, right? I have a lot of people I talk to, a lot of owners who really don't care that much about their accounting, right? And they'll say so. They're like, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. And most of those people don't care about it 360 days out of the year. It's that 361st day when they go to the bank and say, I'd like to extend my line of credit, and their banker looks at their financial statements and says, these are junk, that suddenly they care about their accounting, right? So does that matter to you? Assisting in workflow management, I'll talk about that in just a second, and then better accountability for all departments, right? So one of the things I just want to look at here really quickly, and I'll go through this quickly, but this is something that we've used in our consulting business for 30, 40 years. And it's called the sales production process, and it's basically when you're a consultant, what you want to do is you want to break things down into smaller pieces so that you can solve smaller problems and help your client make money in a way that's pretty easy for you to identify and them to execute, all right? So this is how we would look at a dealership. You basically have a sales production process. We're going to put raw materials into this end of this process and out the other end of so prospects, inventory, what's happening in the economy, et cetera. And out the other end of the process, we're supposed to get sales, satisfied customers, and some profit on the books and cash in the bank to prove it. But what are these different stages and what do we go through? Well, you can organize them however you'd like. What we do is we talk about the first stage is getting the sale, traditional sales. Then we've got to get somebody, a bank, to finance it, or a finance company, Sheffield, somebody like that, somebody who's brokering deals, or their local bank. Then we've got to do the delivery and service work, right? That could be as easy as just pulling it around and hooking it up. It could be as complex as adding a generator, adding an awning, doing hitch work, right? Putting in a new water display. I mean, there could be a lot of work. And then we have the accounting, right, where we're accounting for everything that was done after the customer takes delivery. And then after all the bills are paid, sort of taking the final score after all the bills are paid and all the money's collected to what did we really make, right? Then we have the sale, and it doesn't stop there, though, because we've got the opportunity for warranty service, retail service, aftermarket sales, and our hope would be not only for that to also be a profit center, but to be able to close this loop by having satisfied customers who will come back and bring us more business, either through referrals or repeat business, right? So when we talk about managing this whole process, most of us in your dealership, most of you care mostly about what goes on here, right? I mean, are we selling enough, right? And if we're selling enough, then that solves all problems. It doesn't really, but it's a nice, easy thing to say about. Most of us don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about this back here. And I don't blame you. I'll show you some numbers in a minute of why I would agree that that's not where to spend your time. Excuse me. Let me go back here. So, but let's talk about this scenario, okay? We've got a dealership. The owner is looking at all the deals, paying attention to all the deals, knows what he's making on the deals, happy with all the deals, and he averages what he anticipates to be a 17% profit on those sales, okay? Let's just not worry about, 17% of what I know is the right question, but let's just assume that's a nice number, all right? But then he gets his books back from the accountant at the end of the year or the end of the quarter, and they're showing that he made an 11% profit. Now, let's say that's still a nice number, right? Making an 11% profit. We're still happy with it, but where'd the 6% go? And there's not anything that anybody can tell me about where that 6% went based on these numbers, right? So a big part of having systems in place is to know what's impacting the profitability of your business as you do your business, right? Not finding out at the end of the year that even though it seemed like a really great year, we didn't make much money, right? That doesn't help you manage your business. You need to know what's going on as it's going on. And so what we would like to be able to do is see as we go through time, where are these things happening? If when we closed the deal and the customer took delivery of that deal here, we were at a 12% profit, and then when all the bills were paid, we were an 11% profit, well then yes, we were paying more bills than we thought or getting less money than we thought, but that's not a huge problem. That's only 1% of the problem, right? If we can see the full picture of everything that's happening in all the different stages of our business, we as owners can get in and look at how do I improve my business. So I had a 17% profit when I wrote up the deal. I went to an 18% profit when I got them financed. Maybe you're selling Tire Guard. Maybe you're selling an extended warranty. Maybe you're getting some finance participation from an industry lender, all right? And that's going up. But now, when we get done with all the delivery and setup work, it went down. Now, I could give you a punch list of the top 5 things to look for why that would happen, right? And I'm not the only one. Other people could as well. But at least you know where am I going to start going and looking for my problems, right? And without that, you got nothing. I mean, are you going to yell at the accounting department about this? It's probably not their fault. Are you going to yell at the sales department and say you need to earn more profit? Well, I don't know. Maybe we price ourselves right out of the market. But if we see this, we can see, I have a problem somewhere in between my communication between my service department and my sales department. So either my sales department's giving stuff away and it's not getting caught until it gets to the service department, or my service department's inefficient, or it could be any of those 5 things, right? So a big part of a dealership management system is being able to see in all those areas. And if you're using just an accounting system, my mother used to say this, it's like taking the radar in an airplane and moving it all back into the tail and pointing it out the back. It's going to give you a perfect vision of where you were, but it's not telling you much about where you're going. Accounting is about the past, right? Adding a dealership management system is about looking at the past. You need to get your accounting out of it, but looking at what's going on in your future as well, right? And one of the things that's interesting about that, generally you're not going to find a whole lot of room for improvement in the accounting. Going from the worst accounting to the best accounting is probably not going to improve your profitability that much. Where the profit gets improved is as you get better and better control over what's going on in the future of your business, right? Improving your service department, improving your finance department, improving your sales department, right? And those are all things that you can do with a dealership management system, or at least getting the information so that you know where you need to fix those issues, all right? So with that in mind, we got about 15 minutes left, and I want to start switching over to helping you identify, are you somebody who would where it'd be good to use a dealership management system, be looking at it, be thinking about making a change or not, all right? So the reason for, these are my opinions, all right? You might find somebody else who will tell you that getting a dealership management system will make your life easier and save you lots of money. In my opinion, these are not the reasons to get a dealership management system. It's not to make your life easier. It's not to save time. It's not to save paper. It's not to save money or reduce staff. Some of those things may happen. More likely, they won't really happen. You're going to move things from one area to another. You personally might spend less time in one department than another department, or doing one thing than another thing. But in my opinion, the number one reason to get a dealership management system is because you're no longer able to control everything in your business by yourself. And that is costing you sales and time and money. Okay, just if you think you're absolutely in control of everything that's going on in your business, then you are either right, in which case, awesome for you, right? Or you're wrong, and until you realize that you're wrong, putting something else in place is probably not going to solve the problem, right? So I believe that it's because you're at the point where you can't control everything by yourself. Now, I know people who run 15-person operations and can control everything by themselves. I know people who, a 4-person operation, they need some help. A lot of that has to do with volume, has to do with what you're selling, the kind of product you're selling, the complexity of what you're selling, right? I was down here to as few as 5 people in this organization in 2008, and I couldn't run it by myself, right? So it's how much control do you have over what's going on? So as we switch to who needs a dealership management system, I'm going to go back to my stick figure guy here for a second, and then we'll get into some punch lists here. But if you're this person who's doing all these things in your head and manages all of this yourself, you are probably good. If you feel like you can handle all that and you are all in control of it, whatever you're doing now, if you're writing stuff down on a yellow pad, if you're doing spreadsheets, if you're using QuickBooks or whatever, you're probably in pretty good shape, right? And you could do something different, but what you're going to be doing is adding another bubble here that you have to worry about, right? If you're a person you've gotten to the point where you have 2 or 3 other people who are critical people in your business that are working and making decisions that impact your bottom line without checking in with you all the time, that's the key thing, right? They've got some ability to work independently. They've got some, they're going to come in the morning, they're going to do their job all day, and you may check in with them, but you may not check in with them. You need something in place that's going to be able to help you at some point go and look and say, hey, what's really happening? Is what sales doing really talking to what service is doing? Does it make sense with accounting? And when you get to that point, that's when you really need to start thinking about getting something that's written specific for your business. Because doing that with spreadsheets just gets to be an awful bear. And if you get to the point where you've got lots of people doing that, then it becomes an easy decision, right? You still have to pick, well, which one do I want? And how do I feel about this versus that, right? But when you get to the point, the people who are on this call that have 20 plus employees, if you're in the category of you don't have a system in place now, you're on this call because you know you need to be there. If you've got 3 or 4 employees and you're on this call and you don't have a system, you may still be going, I don't know for sure, right? It gets to be an easier decision the bigger you are, right? To the point where it's a no-brainer. I've got a client that's got 50 employees, right? It's a no-brainer. He has to. There's no way he can't, right? So that size and who's responsible for thing has a lot to do with who needs a dealership management system. Who does not need a dealership management system? Maybe that's a good place to start. And I think that if you're a small business with 1 or 2 people doing everything, as much as I'd love to work with you, as much as any of the companies out there would love to work with you, the reality is you probably don't need a dealership management system, right? You might need some tools, right? You might need a better spreadsheet, or you might need an invoicing system, and you might need, there are places where you can get a module to help with this or a module to help with that, and that's wonderful, but you probably don't need a fully integrated, do everything from start to finish system. If you're a business that's really happy with where you are right now, you're probably in good shape. If you're in total control of everything and you're making a 10 to 12% bottom line and you're happy with that, you may not need a system, all right? If you're cash rich, this sounds like a joke, but this is based on real experience. If you are a cash rich dealership who doesn't want anybody to know what's going on in the books, you might not want to put a dealership management system in place because it keeps good track of stuff, right? I've had people who've said, I don't want that because I don't want anybody to know what the heck's going on, including my banker and including Uncle Sam, right? So if that's you, be careful, right? Because you can't cook things just the way you want them when you've got a industry-specific system. And then dealers who don't really want to know what's going on because they don't really want to have to make the changes, right? If you're not, I'm going to talk about this here in another couple minutes, but if you're getting a system and thinking that you're not going to change anything else in your business, you're probably getting it for the wrong reasons. People who do need it. If you're growing faster than you can have kids, and I say that not very jokingly because I know an awful lot of people who, they're really counting on that next level of management is coming from their children, right? And that's cool. That's a great way to grow to hand it off to the next generation and you live forever, right? But if the business is growing, you can trust your kids usually, right, to do a good job, to be honest with your money. But if you're having to hire a lot of outside people because you can't have kids fast enough, that might be time to look at a system. If you're making sales but losing money, if you're good at sales but not at numbers, you've got multiple locations, you need to increase your profits and cash, you'd like to eventually sell the business, that's a really important one. What are you selling if you're going to leave? You have to be able to document a long-term history of success with the business. You can't just say, hey, could you buy it because I used to run it? Dealers who would like to hand the business to their kids and need some help with helping the kids understand what works in the business and what doesn't. And then dealers who are wanting to borrow money. Very hard to borrow money if you don't have good numbers, okay? You may have a friend that's in the banking business and get away with it for a little while, but sooner or later somebody's going to look at your financials, and if they don't make sense, they're going to tell you they can't lend you more money. Other things, if you're facing growing and more sophisticated competition from other dealers and or company stores, that's an issue that we're not going to cover on this webinar, but it's something that people think about out there, right? Dealers who are feeling pressure to grow and expand but aren't sure that they have the personnel to do so. There are manufacturers out there who are very aggressive, and if they're asking you to grow and you don't grow, they will find somebody to grow for them, right? And that, you need to be wary of that. You need to be thinking about that. They're not wrong in doing that, right? If they believe there's market share out there and you're not meeting it, they're going to find somebody who can. So you may have that pressure on you, and you need better controls so you can do it. And then dealers who can manage their business in their sleep but are getting bored of it and ready for the next challenge, right, to be able to do that growth. So what should I be looking for? And I just want to end with a couple of things here where we're going to I want to end with a couple of things that you could take away if you're thinking that, hey, maybe it's time for me to start looking. I want to give you some things that you could actually be using to go out and be thinking about as you're looking, okay? One of the things that you need to make sure you're paying attention to is everybody focuses on the software, but there's a lot more going on than the software. I once was talking to somebody who did this, who sold dealership management software in the car business for like 25 years, and she shared this with me. There's 6 things that have to happen for there to be a successful implementation. And I'm not saying this to scare you. These are all things that can be accomplished, right? You can do these things, but you've got to be paying attention to them and make sure that whoever you're working with is also paying attention to them. One of them is getting the right software for your business, right? Get the thing that's going to make that you've looked at the features, you know what you are getting, you know what you're not getting, you're happy with what you are getting, you're happy with what you're not getting, right? You understand that balance between, having lots of modules or a few modules. Pay attention to what's going to be the right thing for you. It's not a one-size-fits-all proposition, all right? And as I said before, I know people, I don't know anybody that does this who doesn't have happy customers. And likewise, I don't know anybody who does this who doesn't have some people who've been unhappy, right? It's about picking the right thing. The second thing is you've got to have appropriate and working hardware networking, right? You can't take great software, put it on terrible computers, and expect it to work. That's a lot easier to deal with today than it was a long time ago, but you should be thinking about this as you're thinking about putting something in place. Good and accurate data conversion is absolutely critical. All right, if you take the best system in the world and you've got the best people in the world and they've got the best training in the world, but you give them garbage data, they're going to get garbage data. So how do you have good information in your system? And there's different companies will have a different approach to that, but you need to make sure that however it gets done, that you've got good data in there. You can't put terrible data in and then complain your numbers are wrong all the time. You have to have trainable people who get good training. And I'm saying, obviously, there's a lot of responsibility on the software company to do the training, but having trainable people falls on you. And if you have people who don't want to learn, can't learn, aren't going to learn, are going to fight it at every step of the way, it's going to be really difficult to have a successful implementation. Now, almost everybody that I know likes and wants to keep their job. So if you as the owner say, hey, we're doing this, you need to learn this, they will generally comply with that. But if they're not complying with that and you let them not comply, then you have a real big problem on your hands. So make sure there's a feedback loop in place so you understand, you know, do I have the right people on board? Are they getting the training they need? And get some feedback from the people that you're working with if you're working with somebody. You got to have good support available. Having a great system that you don't know how to run or can't get help on Saturday afternoon when you have an emergency, you need help when you need it. So pay attention to that. And then last, being able to make the appropriate business process changes. I said this before. If you think you're going to get a system and the only thing you're going to change in your business is that you've got a system, then you're probably getting the system for the wrong reason, because the system is going to start telling you that you need to have a different process in place in some areas. I'm not saying you change everything about your business, but it is important to understand that you will need to be able to make some changes in order to make this work, okay? If you go into it knowing this and understanding this, it can be a really great experience because you'll know what you want to get out of it, and the company you're working with will know what you want to get out of it, and you should be able to be successful getting it out of it. But if you go in thinking, oh, I picked the right software, I think I got the right software, everything should be fine, you got more work to do. All right, and then I just want to talk about one last thing here, and then we'll move into questions. When you're thinking about pricing considerations, all right, and this is always on people's minds, how much do things cost? And I'm not going to talk about what anything costs, but these are the things you got to be thinking about, is what are your upfront software costs, right? Because some companies will have them, some companies don't have them. It might be big, it might be little. Generally, if it's little, there's going to be some kind of ongoing monthly fee. Sometimes they're both, right? But you got to ask about that. What are your data conversion costs, right, up front? If they're very, very low, that might be great, except that probably means that the expectation is that you're going to do a lot of that data conversion, and you may be very pleased with that. You might want to do that. But sometimes you're also hiding costs, right? If somebody's going to do that data entry for you and get it done in a couple weeks, and you're going to have to pay your person for the next 12 months to get it done, don't forget about the payroll part of that, right? I mean, your employee expects to get paid to do the work, so understand what that's going to be and make sure you're not, missing something there. Same thing with training, right? Now, that's different. People are on different parts of the spectrum. I know people are just like, hey, just let me get in there. I just want to work on it. I don't need any training. Well, then great. Probably shouldn't be worrying about a whole lot of upfront training costs. But if you're dealing with somebody who says, oh, you're not going to need any training and you feel like you want some training, go back and ask about that again, because everybody does training, right? Everybody can do training. You just got to figure out what is it, then what am I going to need to pay for it, getting the appropriate amount that I want. And then hardware costs, if any, right? That's getting easier and easier and easier. A lot of people will host this stuff online, or they can work, most stuff works on most Windows computers these days. So, but if you've got really old hardware, you might have to do something with that. So those are the kinds of upfront costs you got to think about. And then you also need to think about what are the monthly fees, if any, right? And again, there's a mix. I don't know of anybody that doesn't have any kind of ongoing maintenance fee. It's very hard to stay in business. Even QuickBooks now, you got to buy an upgrade every year or two, right? But a lot of people have moved to a model where you're not paying a whole lot up front. You're just kind of on a pay-as-you-go basis, so the software can kind of earn its keep, right? It can make the money for you, and then you can pay for it out of the money that it's helping you make. And then what are any ongoing support and or training fees, right? And I wish I could tell you that there was an easy apples to apples comparison as you're working with different companies, but almost every different company is going to have some different mix of these things in order to meet their business needs. They're not trying to obfuscate or do anything. It's just different business models working for different companies. And the people who've been around for 10, 15, 20 years have figured out what they need to do to stay around, right? So you just want to make sure that when you're thinking about these things and asking about them, there are reasons why the prices can be very, very different, right? And a lot of it can have to do with how much work are you going to do, are they going to do, what the expectations are in terms of support, right? If you need to be able to reach somebody at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon when you're trying to close a deal, and you need them to speak, good, easy to understand English, you're probably going to need to pay more for that than somebody where you just send in an email, right? But again, it's a variety, and you got to figure out what's going to be best for you. The other thing to be paying attention to in the pricing is what type of contract are you signing, and what's the length of that contract. I had a customer that switched off of another system in the last year, and I was asking him, well, what did you pay up front for your data conversion and training? He said, oh, I didn't pay anything up front. I'm like, oh, did you have to do it all yourself? He's like, no, they did all kinds of work for me. They were in here, they trained me, they did this, they did that, they did this. I'm like, and they didn't charge you anything. Wow. And then when he went to go convert, he's like, oh, wait, I can't switch. I'm in a 5-year contract that I can't get out of. Well, what's the 5-year contract for? Oh, I got to pay $1,000 a month for the next 5 years. So really your upfront costs were $60,000, right? They just leased them. So you got to pay attention to that also, right? Now they didn't trick him, okay? He signed the contract. It was a perfectly legal contract. I'm just saying pay attention to that, right? What are you signing up for, and make sure you're asking the questions about all those things. Anyway, so if there are questions, I didn't do a great job of paying attention to the hands or questions, but I don't think there were any. But now, again, if you'd like to ask them, you can either raise your hand here and I can unmute your microphone, or if you want to type in a question here, I can try to answer that, and I'll do my best to see them. We're at an hour, so if you need to go, you're, of course, most welcome to do that as well. For those of you who feel like it's time to go, I just want to thank you again for joining us, and mostly I want to thank Heather and Corey and the staff at NATDA for putting these on. I know it's a lot of work to market them, and it's just such a great service that they provide. I don't know how many of you remember the days in this industry before NATDA, but boy, it was hard to get information about how to run your business, right? Your lender might share some with you, your manufacturer might share some with you, but the world is so much better. The trailer dealership world is so much better with NATDA in it than it was without it. So thank you to both of them for letting me do this and for all the hard work that they do for all of us as an industry. So any questions? I'll stay on the line. If you want to raise your hand or type those out, you're welcome to get in touch with me. I did not put my contact information in here on purpose. I don't want this to be a commercial. But if you do have questions for me, Heather or Corey at NATDA can certainly get you in touch and with me, and we'd be happy to answer any of those offline also. And it really does look like we don't have any. So that either means I did a good job or I put 40 different people to sleep. I hope it was the first. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, NATDA. Have a great Tuesday afternoon. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.